Welcome to the September 16th, 2014 business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum of members present. To begin the meeting, I'd like to introduce Grace Kittle. She is a fifth grade student at Cascade Elementary School. She is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Grace?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Grace, would you like to introduce the people you brought with you today? Who came with you?
My mom and my principal, Miss Barnes.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Miss Barnes. Thank you for being here. And tell us, what's your favorite subject in school?
Math.
And I have a witness here who can tell everybody that I didn't prompt her. What else do you like to do in school?
I like to read.
Good for you. What else do you do when you're not in school?
I like to do dance and volleyball.
Dance and volleyball. What's your favorite type of dance to do? Like
Jazz.
lyrical? Jazz. That's fun, isn't it? All right. Is any other questions for any other board members for Grace? Well, you did a super job. You'll be able to watch yourself on TV maybe this week or on the internet, on YouTube. And we want to thank you for being here. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Ms. Barnes. And we're going to move on with the next part of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Are there any other guests or students that board members would like to introduce? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. President, I move to approve the agenda as presented by the Agenda Committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman, seconded by Mrs. Fisher. Are there any corrections or amendments?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Williams.
I move to amend the agenda to include a third item under new business, action item, premium holiday.
Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a motion to amend the agenda to add premium holiday as an action item as the third item under new business. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the amendment? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. The student member concurs. I'm going to ask if there is another amendment to move item 1 under the superintendent's report, Clear Spring High School Future Farmers of America Wildlife Prints presentation, to be the first item after board member response to public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. President.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? If not, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes. That brings us back to the original motion by Mrs. Brightman. Are there any other amendments or any other discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. The student member concurs. Approval of minutes.
Mr. President, I would like to move for the adoption of minutes from a closed session held on Tuesday, September the 2nd, 2014, and minutes from the business meeting conducted on the same date.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Mr. Bailey, seconded by Mrs. Brightman for the approval of minutes. Are there any amendments or corrections to the minutes? If not, all those in favor of approval? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. That brings us to public comment. We've not had any individuals sign up to speak. I'm going to ask if there is a motion to suspend for the purposes of today's meeting policy KD to allow the chair to ask if there are people in the audience who did not sign up who wish to speak. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second?
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. The student member concurs. Are there any members of the audience who did not sign up who'd like the opportunity to speak today? Please. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to speak, and as always, I will not cut you off in mid-sentence, but 3 minutes is what the policy says. So,
And then I'll take a deep breath and make it all one long sentence. Good evening, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board. My name is Peter Perini, and I am a candidate for the Washington County Board of Education. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about fiscal responsibility, and I will be brief. One of the fundamental responsibilities of this board is to establish and manage the Washington County Public Schools budget. I think it may come as a surprise to most citizens that the combined budget is $300 million per year, and that is an incredible responsibility. And while the staff assembles the numbers, it is the board who are responsible for the budget. For example, it is the board who must promote enhancing maintenance of effort to provide for increasing teacher and support personnel salaries. I'm familiar with the issue of managing budgets because I was previously the CEO of a large company which had $80 million per year in revenues and approximately 1,000 employees. I understand large and complex budgets. I understand that while none of us like to pay taxes, the business had to follow the rule and pay its taxes in full and on time. The debt service on loans was always paid on time, every time. And I know what it means to make payroll every week. For those who have not run a business, let me put it in more familiar terms. Being financially responsible for the budget is like managing your household expenses. It's important to budget your money, to set aside enough money to pay the bills, to buy groceries, to pay the mortgage. I have never missed a mortgage payment. I have never missed a payroll. I have always paid payroll taxes on time, every time. It is incredibly important that every taxpayer dollar be spent wisely and conservatively. And it's important that we have people on the Board of Education who can understand and control a budget and be financially responsible. It is important because that is how we ensure that we have the best possible schools and instruction for our children, and how we afford to pay teachers what they deserve, and how we ensure the sustainability of our school system for the next generation of students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perini. Are there any other members here, people in the audience who'd like the opportunity to speak? Okay, hearing none, is there any brief board member response to public comment? Okay, we'll move on then to old business. We will move on to the first item under the superintendent's report. Dr. Wilcox.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask Joe Repp, who is the Clear Spring High Ag teacher and FFA advisor, if he wanted to come forward and bring his students, and along with Principal Alshire. Is that how you'd like to do this, guys? All right. Well, then you should all come. I introduced myself to the young people. They introduced themselves to me, but I didn't remember all of your names. I still got Corey. I know that. So I'm
With us, actually, I'm going to allow the students to introduce themselves and conduct their presentation, if that's okay with the board.
It's absolutely fine.
Absolutely.
Good evening. I am Corey Ziegler, president of the Clear Spring High School FFA, and with me this evening is our FFA officer team. Hunter Harshman, vice president, Kyle Hammond, treasurer, Grace Holder, reporter, Jessica Kirby, sentinel, and Monica Garrosh, parliamentarian. Along with us is our FFA advisors, Mr. Pine and Mr. Repp, and Principal Mr. Alshire. FFA is the largest high school youth organization in the world, with over 500,000 members. Students at Clear Spring High School interested in careers in the field of agricultural science, business, and technology have the opportunity to gain career and leadership skills through the FFA program and their agricultural classes.
The FFA organization offers students like us the opportunity to experience the practical skills in a hands-on manner needed in a career through career development events, exposing us to the areas of agriculture like natural resources, mechanics, food and fiber production, marketing, and communications. One of the contests that we participate in is the Envirothon. The Envirothon is a series of competitions in which teams step out of the classroom to solve real-life environmental problems. It consists of 5 areas of environmental science, including wildlife management, forestry, soil science and land use, aquatic ecology, and a current environmental issue.
Clear Spring High School has won the Washington County Envirothon now for 13 consecutive years since 2001, representing Washington County at the Maryland State Envirothon every year. Our teams are better prepared than our competitors from other high schools and homeschool groups because of the time we devote outside of school to study and practice. In addition to our hands-on practical work in agriculture and environmental science academy classes. The American Bison printed title, The Passing Herd, is being held by Kyle Hammond and Grace Holder. It was presented to Clear Spring High School FFA in recognition of first place in the 2014 Washington County Envirothon. Monica Grush is displaying the American Goldfinch art, which was presented at the Maryland State Envirothon in recognition of Washington County earning the high score in the forestry component of this event.
On behalf of the students at Clear Spring High School FFA, our team wants to present these wildlife prints to be displayed at the Center for Education Services as a token of our appreciation to Dr. Wilcox and the Washington County Board of Education for their dedication of ensuring our members have the resources and tools needed to succeed. We value the constant support of our programs and activities for leadership and career development. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we give these young people a round of applause, first of all? I think it's always wonderful when students come forward and present to the board because the board gets a chance to see what I get to see almost on a daily basis, and that is great young people assisting in the growth of their community. I will tell you that the Clear Spring FFA has a special place in my heart, not just because of Mr. Alshire, who is a tireless champion, but because of what I've seen you guys do. Whether it was the chicken coop or whether it was the fish hatchery that you had going there, some of the other projects that you have, you really, I think, show to other kids what's possible if you just pay attention to your environment and you take the natural skills that you have as young people and apply them in a practical way. So I want to say thank you for being role models. Thank you for being leaders within our community. We will gladly accept these pictures and we'll display them with great pride here in our board offices or perhaps in a little more public area. We want to thank you again. Thank you to the instructors. We know that you have breathed a new breath of even fresh life into the program. I will tell you that I was at Hancock High the other day, and that guy said he's coming for you, however. So you want to be careful and not rest on your laurels because he had 12 nice blue jackets hanging across the back room, and he had some kids that were getting it done as well. So we want to keep after it a little bit. Now, I'll tell you one quick story, and then I'm going to turn it over to board members. About 2 years ago when I first came to this district, I was up and we were looking at the chicken coop, and of course we were back at one of the sheds, and Principal Alshire grabbed me and took me aside, and there was a young man there that was working on an old diesel engine. I'm not sure it was a Farmall. It was an International tractor, and James was poor-mouthing. Mr. Alshire was saying, oh, this thing won't work, and the young man was saying, well, you know, I've got a lot of pride in this vehicle. This really... James kept saying to me, knowing that I'm from Waterloo, Iowa, the home of John Deere tractors, but wouldn't that look good, Superintendent, in green? And it wasn't long after that I talked to Boyd Michaels, who has a great interest in vocational education as well. And he said, well, it would be good to get those guys a new tractor, but this board, this 7 elected, provided that new tractor to you, and I know they're going to continue to support you. So I want to thank the board for your support of the young people, but also tell you thank you very much. And let me get these from you. Please.
Questions from, or comments from any board members? Mrs. Harshman?
I just have a brief comment. My husband was very active in FFA at South High, but he also had cousins from Clear Spring and from Boonesboro, and they used to go into competition all the time. So you hold a very special place in my heart, too, and I'm glad to see you so active and so succeeding so well. It's just amazing. So keep it up and beat Hancock.
Mrs. Brightman?
I would be very interested, I think we all would, if you have any particular career pathways you'd like to share with us. Maybe go around the students. I'd be very interested where you're taking this to the next level.
I want to be a veterinary technician.
That's nice. That's nice.
Great.
Very good.
I'd like to become a forester, and I'd like to go to Allegheny College and then transfer to West Virginia University to get a bachelor's.
Perfect.
Coleman, that should resonate with you.
Yeah. My brother's a forestry major at West Virginia University.
I'd like to be a welding certified or possibly do heavy equipment operation and go to possibly a trade school or some technical school to
Excellent. Very good.
And I want to be a nurse. My classes at Clear Spring and FFA has helped me to do critical thinking and work in tough situations.
Nursing is definitely that. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to be an agronomist, and in layman's terms, it's a plant scientist.
I want to be an architect, but I like farming, so that's fine. Okay.
You might find a way to combine those two loves. Good, thank you.
Anything, Mr. Bailey?
I've been seeing the FFAs from Clear Spring come to board meetings for 16 years, and I'm always impressed with their ability to perform in public. They have good skills, and I know you work on public speaking, and I know that you work on Robert's Rules of Order for your business meetings and so forth. And those kinds of things have always impressed me because you certainly display what you have learned in those classes. And that's been a tradition at your school.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, I'd just like to say congratulations on your accomplishments, and thank you for sharing your awards with us to be placed here for the community to enjoy. I think that was just a very special thing to do, and thank you so much.
Mrs. Fisher?
Well, having spent 29 years at Clear Spring High School, I kind of watched the FFA grow. Dr. Michael and Mr. Ivan Williams were the two directors at the time that I joined the staff at Clear Spring. And I can remember some problems in the beginning, like an overflowing manure pit.
Ooh.
That got us a lot of attention there from the state for a while. But and then after Mr. Michael and Miss Williams, we had two very capable ladies running the show, Miss Shank and Miss Lowry. And now you have two more, I understand, very capable gentlemen running this show. You've come a long way. You've had great success, and I wish you much more success in the future.
Any other comments? Mr. Radnow?
Mr. President, I know, I forget how many years ago it was when we decided to add the environmental science program magnet. And Clear Spring was pretty much a natural choice. and Mrs. Schenk and Mrs. Ballard made their way there from Boonesboro High School in an effort to get the thing up and running. And you guys are just the next rung of the ladder of success that has taken place at Clear Spring High School. And I know you have two wonderful teachers now. Smithsburg High School was very sad to see one of them go. So I'm looking forward to seeing more from your underclass colleagues, because this is a great program, a very successful program, and one that we should be very proud of, and we are very proud of you. Thank you.
And I'll just wrap up by thanking you all as well. Thank you for, we work on the board to try to create opportunities for kids, but it's up to you to take the opportunity. We can make the opportunity, but only you can grab it. And when you succeed, it makes us look good. So thank you for taking advantage of one of the many opportunities out there. I think we're all proud of you and look forward to see where you all end up in the future. I'm sure you'll all be very successful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Drive safely going home. Instructors, go home. You got a big day tomorrow.
That brings us to old business. The first item is consideration of the second read to rescind four different policies. Mr. Trotta?
Good evening. The first reading of these policies was presented to the board at its public business meeting conducted on September 2nd. At that time, the board approved the rescission of these policies. Since the first reading, members of the public were requested to provide comments. We have not received any comments. At this time, we're requesting the board's approval of the second reading of these policies. The policies in question are GCNA, GCPC, GCPD, and GDPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. President, I move to approve the second reading to rescind policy GCNA, evaluation of all professional personnel in instruction. The second reading to rescind policy GCPC, entitled Pension and Retirement Systems. The second reading to rescind policy GCPD, Separation. And the second reading to rescind policy GDPB, entitled Resignation, Non-Certificated Employees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fisher and seconded by Mrs. Brightman to rescind the policies. Is there any discussion? If not, the question is on the approval of the motion and the rescission of the policies. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. Second item under old business is consideration of the second read to rescind policy IDA and second reading of revised policy EBCD.
Thank you. During the Board of Education's public business meeting conducted on September 2nd, it approved the rescission of policy IDA, and it adopted the proposed changes to policy EBCB. Since that time, the Policy Committee conducted a public work session on September 4th to further review these policies. The Policy Committee does not have any further recommended changes. Additionally, members of the public were invited to offer comments. We have not received any comments. At this time, the Policy Committee is requesting the board to move forward with these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the second reading to rescind policy IDA, entitled Emergency Closings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of rescission of policy IDA? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, next I would like to approve the second reading of revised policy EBCD entitled Emergency Closings.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of adopting the policy? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Item 3 under old business is consideration of the second reading of proposed policy GBGA.
Thank you. This policy was also considered by the Board of Education at its public business meeting on September 2nd. There was a question posed as to whether this policy and other policies that are in the policy manual apply to members of the Board of Education. During the Public Policy Committee's meeting on September 4th, it had a rather lengthy discussion about this particular matter, and it's asked that I bring you a briefing as to what they're recommending. The Policy Committee concluded that it would be beneficial to insert new language in the introductory section of the policy manual to address the application of policies to members of the Board of Education. The Policy Committee is continuing to study this matter, and it will be bringing forth its recommendations to the members of the board at a future meeting. At this time, the Policy Committee is requesting the board's approval of the second reading of policy GBGA. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed policy GBGA entitled Policy Prohibiting Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Fisher and seconded by Mrs. Williams. Excuse me. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Williams?
Just a question. Looking in the definitions, the definition for bullying, the use of the word intentional conduct, intentional electronic communication, and again, the use of the word intentional for the definition of intimidation, subjection to intentional action. Just wondering if it's necessary to prove intent, if that's really a word that we need in this policy. But to me, it would be very difficult to determine or to have someone take the defense, well, that wasn't my intention when I acted in this manner.
Mention under the first bullet, under the definition of bullying, that there could be perceived characteristics including, so that relates to perceived, but that doesn't take away the intentional at the top of the definition that you're referring to.
And as we looked at the approach taken by other districts, this is the terminology that we saw used on a pretty consistent basis. So that's where the language was adapted from. But certainly if there's some input from the board that you'd like to take a different direction, we certainly will
Just a question that,
consider that.
I thought would be worthy of consideration. Again, enforcing a policy, I don't know how difficult it would be to prove intent. So,
Could I respond to that?
Mrs. Brown?
In the new code of conduct, intentionality is something that we're going to be dealing with in all discipline matters. So I think actually having the word in here helps us more align with the new code of conduct. And I agree, it's going to be very difficult to define, but I think that's a task we're going to be confronted with going forward.
Are there other questions or comments? I look at that question from somewhat the opposite point of view, too. I mean, it's part of what you have to consider when you look at it all. If an employee has a supervisor or something who is 6'7" tall and very big, and they find that person intimidating, can you be bullied if they're not intending you to bully? I mean, so it sort of becomes difficult on both sides. First, it's hard to prove intent. On the other hand, it's hard to make somebody liable for some sort of disciplinary action for something that they're not intending to do just because they happen to be a tall, so I think it's difficult on both ends. Is there any other discussion? If not, the question's on Mrs. Fisher's motion to approve policy GBGA. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Item 4 under new business or old business is the second reading to rescind policy BHA, regulation BHA-R, policy BHAA, and to adopt policy BIA and BIA-R.
Thank you very much. During the business meeting conducted on September 2nd, there were a number of questions posed with regard to this particular, to particularly policy BIA, and my comments are limited to BIA. What I'd like to do is just briefly review those questions and then share with you the thought process that the policy committee went through. The first question related to Article 3B, and there was some questioning about the wording in the first sentence, and what the policy committee concluded is that based upon the comment that was offered, they agreed with the comment that was offered, and they believe the sentence should be reworded to read as follows. All new members are strongly encouraged to attend the orientation for new Board of Education members conducted by the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, MABE, to understand the proper role of the Board of Education members in the state of Maryland. So that was the first question. There was a second question that also related to Article 3B. There was a question as to whether the second sentence was required. The policy committee concluded that it should remain in the policy. There was a third question relating to Article 3B, that is whether that same last sentence is consistent with policy BHD, which concerns board members' expenses. Once again, the policy committee looked at both that policy and this policy and concluded that they are consistent. And finally, there was a comment offered with regard to Article 3B. And based on that comment, the members of the policy committee are recommending that the sentence that appears there be reworded as follows. The agenda will be established based upon the background and experience new members bring with them. We offer those comments to you, and at this time, we're requesting your approval of the second reading of these policies and administrative regulations. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the second reading to rescind policy BHA entitled Orientation New Board Members, to approve the second reading to rescind Administration Regulation BHAR entitled Orientation New Board Members, and to approve the second reading to rescind policy BHAA entitled Board Candidate Orientation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion on the rescission of these two policies and regulation? If not, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Is there a motion?
Finally, I move to approve the second reading of policy BIA entitled New Board Member Orientation and the second reading of the administrative regulation BIAR entitled New Board Member Orientation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fisher and seconded by Mrs. Brightman. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Williams?
Yes, we spent a lot of time talking about this in committee, and as I reviewed it in preparation for today's meeting, I was looking under the policy statement and procedures, letter C, and I'm wondering if it might be wise to insert or appointed, because there have been times when there is a new member to the board who has not been elected but has been appointed and would certainly be in need of orientation.
That's true. If somebody has to quit, someone else is appointed.
That's how I started.
So is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to amend policy BIA 3, policy statement and procedures, letter C, to insert or appointed after the word elected.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to amend by Mrs. Williams and seconded by Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion on the amendment? If not, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? The amendment passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. Is there further discussion or any further amendments? Mrs. Williams?
Just one, and again, I apologize for this. I know we spent a lot of time talking about this, but I'm wondering if it would read better under background. It sounds as though, when I read this, it sounds as though what I would like to do is to move the prepositional phrase "with varying degrees of knowledge of the local operating practices of the board" to follow members. So it reads as though it's the members who have varying degrees of knowledge and not those who are doing the electing of those people. That the people doing the electing are of varying degrees of knowledge about the operating practices. Minor thing, but so I'd like to move to amend policy BIA under background number 2 to move the prepositional phrase beginning with the word "with" to follow after Board of Education members.
Is there a second?
Second.
Amendment offered by Mrs. Williams, seconded by Mrs. Fisher. Is everybody clear on what the amendment is?
Mr. Trot, can you read that, please?
Every 2 years, new Board of Education members with varying degrees of knowledge of the local operating practices of the board are elected.
Thank you.
And I would point out that same terminology exists in the administrative regulation.
The original.
Yes, that's,
Gotcha.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, the question's on the adoption of Mrs. Williams' amendment to policy BIA. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. The student member concurs. Is there any further discussion? Mrs. Williams?
A question. Mr. Trotta, you mentioned that verbiage also appears in BIAR. So do we need to do an amendment to that regulation in order to make that?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to amend BIA-R by Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion?
Point of order, Mr. President. Maybe I was asleep. We've already made a motion for the regulation.
No. Yes, Mrs. Fisher, her original
The
motion,
motion was just for the policy.
her original motion was for the policy and the regulation. Did I miss that, Mr. Trotta?
that's my recollection. It was, they were combined into one motion.
So the current item on the floor is Mrs. Williams' motion to amend BIA-R. Is there any further discussion on her amendment? If not, all those in favor of approval of her amendment? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. Is there any further discussion on the main motion?
This is not really discussion on the motion, but perhaps a point of clarification for the board. This is an unusual situation for the board in that you're both voting on and approving regulation. Do you want to speak to that as to why that is? Because typically the superintendent offers regulations.
Right. I think I mentioned that last time when we were doing this on first read. Normally, the superintendent does create the regulation, but this regulation has been created by the policy committee. So that's why we're voting on it.
I just want to make sure that members of the public understood that there was a difference in this time in the mind of the board.
And I would add, too, that it's, the policy committee created, it actually was originally created through the ad hoc committee, worked its way through the policy committee, and we had discussion on this, and the reason that it was, it's similar to the case where we were doing the ethics regulation, which we were required to have by law, but I think at the time, the board didn't believe that it made sense to have the superintendent writing a regulation that would govern the ethics of the board members. We also did the same thing when we approved the board member travel policy and regulation, because we didn't believe that it made sense for the superintendent to be writing a regulation that would govern how the board managed itself. And the feeling on the policy committee and I think on the ad hoc committee was that this was a circumstance similar to that, wherein it did not make sense to have the superintendent writing a regulation that would tell the board vice president what he or she or the president's designee ought to do. And that's why we decided to include this as something for the board to approve.
Although I'd gladly.
You'd like to write that
I
regulation?
would like that. No, I don't. No.
Is there any further discussion? If not, the question's on Mrs. Fisher's motion to approve policy BIA and regulation BIA-R. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 6-1, and the student member concurs. Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Thank you, Ms. Francisco. I didn't mean to leave you out. Next is new business. The first item is the consent agenda.
Good evening, Dr. Wilcox, Dr. Hardings, and members of the board. We have on the board's agenda this evening several procurements. Seeking board approval to move forward with those is a package here. The first bid is the renovation of 701 Frederick Street. The project will repurpose the Frederick Street building from its former administrative and maintenance use to become a new home of a public service academy adjunct to the Washington County Technical High School. The scope includes selective demolition and renovation of approximately 16,000 square feet of interior space. The renovated facility would provide 4 classrooms, a multi-purpose room, food service capabilities, offices, conference and small group instruction spaces, storage room, and accessible toilets. The existing rooftop heating and ventilation and air conditioning units would be retained. It's recommended that these units be supplemented by 3 small systems that are described in the bid alternates, which will add capabilities to the project, allowing for flexible use of the mechanical system there. The schedule is predicated on completion of the work by December 12th, and the bid is recommended to be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Callis Contractors of Hagerstown, at a total cost of $291,700. Second on the agenda tonight is contracted services for snow removal services. This recommendation is to renew the contract for a second period or a third year. The companies that have serviced the school system over this past 2 years have performed satisfactorily, according to Tony Mayhew, the operations supervisor. Prices per snow event will remain unchanged as they were when they originally bid to the school system 2 years ago, and they'll be held firm through the snow season. The bid is recommended to be renewed with East Coast Landscaping, Mann's Construction, Smithsburg Rental Service, and Advantage Landscaping. And the unit prices are provided for your information in the agenda package. Third on the agenda is a request to purchase network servers for 7 school complexes. These servers and storage units are being requested to replace aging servers that have reached the limits of their processing and storage capacity. The unit rates are under the Maryland Education Consortium contract, and the requisition 175393 to Dell Computers at a total cost of $75,005.14 is being presented for your consideration this evening. Fourth on the agenda is a purchase of 85 laptop computers to be distributed for the Career and Technology Education programs at Clear Spring High School and Boonesboro High School. These laptops are needed for use by students in the environmental, agricultural, and natural resources classrooms at Clear Spring High School and Career Research and Development at Boonesboro High School. The total of these three requisitions is $56,100, and the recommended vendor is Hartford Computer Group. Fifth and last on the agenda this evening for bids is the purchase of 20 10-packs of iPads and one MacBook for various schools, and those orders total $81,888.95 on 4 different requisitions from Apple Incorporated. I'm here, and I know there are other folks behind me as well who can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the bids/requisitions for the renovation of 701 Frederick Street facility to the Callis Contractors at $291,700. Contracted services, snow removal, second renewal to Advantage Landscape, East Coast Landscaping, Mann's Construction, and Smithsburg Rental at bid prices. Network servers for 7 school campuses to Dell Computer Corporation at $75,005.14. 85 laptop computers for Career and Technology Education at Clear Spring High School and Boonesboro High School to Hartford Computer Group at $56,100, and 20 10-packs of iPads and one MacBook for various schools to Apple Incorporated at $81,888.95.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bailey, seconded by Mr. Ridenhour to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion or any questions? Mr.
A
Ridenhour?
quick question, because I'm sometimes computer illiterate. 10 packs, what are they?
10 in a set.
10
10 in a set, so it's,
of 10 sets of iPads?
yeah, I could have put 200 there, but
That's, okay.
they were
that's
actually
fine.
ordering in 10 packs, but we get a little better unit rate.
I
when we do
understand.
that.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure I was correct. Thank you.
Is there other discussion? Mrs. Brightman?
Another brief one. How many students do we expect to be able to serve at 701 Frederick for the Public Service Academy?
Right now, we anticipate sometime during the second semester to move the criminal justice program there from Washington County Technical High School. I think they currently have 37 juniors and a few less than that, I believe, seniors. They'll be there, I assume, on an A-Day, B-Day, much like they have at the Tech High. They'll receive their academic subjects back at the Technical High School. We also plan to move the Fire and Rescue Academy from the South High campus, which is currently located in one of the old Antietam Academy portables that remain there on the campus, so we anticipate moving those students there.
How many?
Capacity of the building.
How many
could-
fire and rescue students?
That number I don't have off the top of my head is like 6 seniors and 4 juniors, or vice versa, I think. And they're there during a half-day program. I believe it starts at 1 o'clock and runs to a little after 4. We do have the potential to expand into several other classrooms and some other partnerships, but we have, like the state rated capacity of the building, we're estimating to be around 100 students.
That's what okay, thank you.
Is there other discussion on the consent agenda? If not, all those in favor of Mr. Bailey's motion to approve the consent agenda? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Next item under new business is consideration of construction of the new West City Elementary School.
Afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. We're very pleased to be here with you this evening to present bid 2015-02 for the construction of West City Elementary. Again, West City in quotes because the school currently doesn't have a name. It will at some point in the near future. We're requesting that you consider approving this bid in the amount of $16,323,200 to Waynesboro Construction Company Incorporated. The board has seen the design documents and construction documents prior to this information going out to bid. We did receive, I believe, 5 contractors bid on the proposal. We had excellent competition. We purposely selected a number of alternates to add into the bid, not because we didn't want them into the base bid, but we wanted to be sure it could control price and stay within our budget. So a lot of items that we traditionally would have placed in the base bid were identified as alternates, and we're very pleased that we're able to include them in this final proposal to you of base bid and alternates. Again, the building's approximately 65,500 square feet. It's a 3-round building, 3 rounds plus pre-K. It also has some of an expanded core for the potential of moving to a 4 or 5 round school in the future, and the state has participated in that additional square footage because of the number of students that potentially are eligible to attend the school based on our current student projections. So at this time, we'd be glad to answer any questions you might have, but we're requesting your approval of bid 2015-02 to Waynesboro. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move to award the contract for the construction of West City Elementary School bid 2015-02 to Waynesboro Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $16,323,200.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman, second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? Mr. Ridenhour?
I'm just curious, and, I have full intention of supporting this decision. We had some issues about 5 years ago with Waynesboro Construction. Have they done, what work have they done from us in that interim period of time that would convince you guys that saving $50,000, $80,000, just have a concern, that's all.
They most recently worked with us on the Bester project. They actually had one of the multi-prime packages there. We haven't had any reason to deny Waynesboro the opportunity to bid, so we're confident they can do the construction.
Okay,
for West
that's all I need. Thank you.
Is there other discussion? Mrs. Williams?
Yes, Waynesboro was not a name that I was familiar with, so I took a look at the website, and my understanding is that they did work at the Barbara Ingram School and also at South High. So kind of piggybacking on Mr. Ridenhour's question, we're confident that they're able to do the work that we want done and do it in a manner that's keeping with our expectations.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further, Mr. Bailey?
Is this a prevailing wage job?
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Brightman?
To piggyback on that, the state is picking up 71% of the eligible cost of this? Okay. What is the square foot price now that the state reimburses?
New number now, but
It
this
is.
fell under the old number, didn't it, Rob?
Right, this fell under the number when it was $224 a square foot.
It's up
plus
to what,
12%
250?
for
Is it
site.
up?
I think it's up to 232 now.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Sort of lagging behind the cost, right, real cost. Thank you.
Is there other discussion?
Mr. President, I'm sorry. Just real quickly, I know it's not on here, but will we be working in concert with the county for the gymnasium expansion
Gymnasiums part, we use community space money, not open school, not POS money.
Right.
But there's community, I think it's 2%, I think we can apply for and support the project. So the community will be eligible to use the gymnasium. Whether we work with Park and Recs and/or included in that would be maybe part of a future agreement we might work with.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I want to thank and congratulate the facility staff. It was, yeah, I thought the same thing when I opened the packet on Friday to see where it came, because a year ago, you weren't in that chair, you were in a chair further north of here, but I think a number of board members asked some pretty pointed questions about, are you sure, Mr. Rollins, that we're going to get this that it's going to come in on budget? And you proved yourself right. And
Well, credit goes to my team and the architect and all the work they did, the endless hours, behind-the-scenes stuff, so thank you.
Well, it was great for me to see, both as somebody who's responsible for public money and who wants to have this great new facility for these students, that you made all the numbers work. And we appreciate all the work that you did and your team did to take this next step. It's probably the biggest step on getting this project done for those students. So thanks to all who were involved in getting us to this point. There's no further comments. The question's on Mrs. Brightman's motion to approve the construction of the new school. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
You bet.
And of course, you'll remind people there'll be no change orders on this project.
Item 3 under no business is a premium holiday. Dr. Wilcox, do you want to introduce this topic?
Yes.
Or a member of your team?
Members of the board and members of the community, for some time now, we've been watching with a great deal of, is this premium holiday or?
It is.
Okay.
Premium holiday.
So we've been watching the fund balance that is associated with our insurance programs. Most people who are employees of the system know that we are self-insured, which means that we collect revenue to mitigate against possible losses. We have a number that we try to hit, but we're in excess of that right now. And we know from looking carefully at our usage patterns that our employees have helped us to hold back some of our costs associated with illnesses and not being well. And given that, what we would like to do right now is for all of our active employees, sometime in December, probably associated with the December 19th payroll, is give an insurance holiday, meaning that our employees would not have to pay their pay-associated premium for their health insurance, their dental insurance, or their vision insurance. We think it's the right thing to do because it rewards those people who have helped us to contain costs. We think it's strategically right for us because it leaves us in a good position, even if we had some bumps in the road along with our health. So we're asking the board to consider supporting this recommendation of creating a premium holiday. I'm certainly available to answer any questions that board members have, but your vote this evening would allow us to begin to communicate with our employees and let them begin planning for having a little extra money right prior to the holidays. And again, that is for employees who are actively engaged in our insurance programs right now. If someone did not participate in our insurance programs, this would mean nothing to them. If this person were retired from the system, this will mean nothing to them. This is for active employees in one of our 3 insurance plans, and of course, across the benefit spectrum of health, vision, and dental.
Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move for the approval of the agreements with the Washington County Educational Support Personnel, Inc., Washington County Teachers Association, and Washington County Association of Administrators and Supervisors, dated September 12, 2014, which provide for a one-time premium holiday on December 19, 2014, for active employees who are enrolled in WCPS's health insurance program at that time.
Is there a second?
I would like to second that, Mr. President.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman, seconded by Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion?
If I could just make two things before Mr. Bailey. One, it's important to note the language because it was chosen specifically. If somebody would leave us during the employment prior to December 19th, they were not here for that pay period, they would not be eligible for the premium. We would not then rebate them some amount of money. They must be in our employment at that time. The second thing is that we use the names of our employee groups, and that's because our employee groups are valued partners. We meet with them in a health advisory committee, and we also met with their union representatives in the negotiations process to make sure that we didn't engage in some kind of unfair practice by somehow discounting what people had to pay to the chagrin of someone else.
That was my comment.
Thank you.
Efficiency, I like it. Are there any other comments? I think this is a great thing, and thank the superintendent and his staff for coming up with this idea for how to help our employees have a few extra dollars in their pockets over the holidays, but also try to address the ever-expanding self-insurance fund balance. We need to keep a balance in that fund to make sure that we can pay claims that our employees have. But as you said, we don't want it to grow too large, and this looks like a solution that really is a win-win for all involved. I'd also like to thank, I mean, really it's not us who've done the work, it's our employees. The reason that the funds are available to do this is because I think our employees are keeping themselves healthy. They're using less health care, which I hope means that they're healthy and that they're smart about their decisions for their own health. And a healthy workforce is a workforce that is in the classroom every day and doing the things that we want them to do. And a side benefit of that is that our fund balance grows. So really, this is the result of the work that they've done, and it's great that we can share the proceeds of their hard work back with them, because really it's to their credit that we're in the position that we are. So I'll gladly support this motion. If there's no further discussion, the questions on Mrs. Brightman's motion to approve the health insurance holiday for affected employees. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. That brings us to the superintendent report.
Thank you, and at this time, I'm going to introduce Mr. Eric Michael, who is the Supervisor of Athletics, Health, and Physical Education, and he's going to give us an update on our Family Life Advisory Committee. Eric?
Making sure we're up. Good evening, President Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and fellow members of the board. I'm here tonight to present an update on the recent activities for the Family Life Advisory Committee. I'd like to start this evening by giving a little background of how we have a Family Life Advisory Committee and why we do that. It's listed in COMAR that each local jurisdiction is to have this advisory committee, and the charge of the advisory committee is to essentially consult with staff in the development, implementation, and evaluation of the family life programs. Family life programs are required also by COMAR as part of the health education requirement. Essentially what the Family Life Committee does is annually meet and evaluate the materials of the family life programs. What that means, and we meet essentially on an as-need basis in Washington County with an annual meeting every spring. In that meeting, typically we review 6 programs, and I'll go through those programs here in a moment, but we basically look at feedback and how well they're going and how to direct instruction from that point on. But at any time during those meetings, if there's a change in content or a change in curriculum, then that committee will make a recommendation, which that recommendation will then be forwarded to the board for approval if there's a change. The committee membership we feel is pretty broad in terms of the members that we have on it, represent a lot of people in our community. First and foremost, we have parents of current students in our schools. We also have members of the community at large. And then I feel we have a pretty good spectrum of individuals that deal with the topics of family life, mostly from the medical field, but also looking at specific things such as teen pregnancy and STI, sexually transmitted infections. As you can see, this group, we have people from Teens Have Choices, which do a lot of work with teens in our community. We also have Girls Incorporated, who also work with girls and the teen community at large. And then we have local doctors. Specifically, we have a local pediatrician that serves as our chairperson on this committee. And then we have members from Meritus Health, as well as a member from Washington County Health Department serving on this. Additionally, we have an administrator from the school-based administration, as well as our family life team as part of this, and one of the high school health teachers. The work that we do annually is, I said, we have essentially 6 areas that we look at. Of the 6 areas, 3 of those are school-based, in-house, meaning our teachers do the instruction, and then 3 of them are outside, where we have teams come in. The first one we look at is, we look at the 9th grade assembly. We do a 9th grade assembly every October. We go to each one of the high schools, and it's a 90-minute presentation, which is a joint effort with Teens Have Choices, Washington County Health Department, and Girls Incorporated. This presentation is, as I said, it's an assembly. So what we do when we look at this is we look at the numbers of students that come in from each school that we're serving. We also look at feedback. The students do a feedback form, as well as feedback from administration from those schools. And then we adjust based off of that, the feedback we get. Because a lot of times, again, with several hundred students in an assembly, we have to make sure that, one, it's attention-getting, but also we're getting the content across as well. The other program is their 6th grade program, and that is taught by a team of individuals from Girls Incorporated. They're trained in the curriculum for the 6th grade level. It's Wise Guys program, and then Willpower, Won't Power for the girls. They go in and teach out of the physical education classroom in the middle schools. With this, we typically will look and get feedback from Girls Incorporated. We also will get feedback from administration, as well as the physical education teachers. Though a lot of times our physical education staff really will kind of say, you need some adjustment with this, and we'll make appropriate adjustments. The other is our in-house, and our in-house are our high school classes. In the high school health class, we have a curriculum that is a standard. One of the standards in the health is the family life, so there's a unit in high school. And basically in the annual meeting, what we'll do is the high school people will give us an update on what's going on with their curriculum, what they're seeing in terms of students within their schools, and sometimes it's specific to certain schools of what they're seeing. But it's basically an update. If they have changes or things they want to present that they would like to, we want a different resource, then they would bring that recommendation to the committee, and the committee would look at it. The other is our middle school program, and that's the family life team that comes on as Mr. Talbert and Mrs. Butts. They do the 5th grade program, they do the 7th grade, and they do the 8th grade program. And again, at the end of the year, they give us updates on the different grade levels and what they're seeing, as well as if they see adjustments that we need to make or update in program, they'll bring that information to the committee, and the committee will look at it. Sometimes there's adjustments just in things we need. For example, a year ago, we went from computer-based social media, we started, put a little more emphasis on texting and sexting as a topic. So all we did was adjust a pamphlet that emphasized and made sure that was touched on as well, as besides just a computer being on MySpace, which was an emphasis on the previous one. So we do that. And then the last one was something that just come up in the last couple years. Probably 2 years ago, I think we had a presentation from Meredith, and we were talking about the birth rates at that point and the concern. And one of the things that come up with that was a recommendation for a research-based curriculum. Washington County Health Department applied for a grant and got a grant, and it's called the PREP grant, which is the Personal Responsibility Education Program. This grant was come about to implement a curriculum on decision-making. The It's Your Game was the title of this. It's an interactive, computer-based program that was brought in and brought forth and recommended and approved. And in that, the goal is to put it into the city schools. And there was a team 2 years ago. We had one of our part-time teachers was teaching this. We also had a team of individuals from Girls Incorporated that were trained to teach this program that were going into the schools. The last 2 years, we've been in Western Heights exclusively. Last year, the first year of implementation, we were in the spring semester. Last year, we were in the entire year. We also did a semester at Antietam Academy. And then last year, we brought on Springfield Middle as well and did some work with some students there in that school. The grant was upped again this year, but not with as much money, so we are looking to put it in, but we are looking to expand and also include E. Russell Hicks as well as Northern Middle into that program. So again, the committee looks at how we can implement that and how we can work with school administration to bring that in. And that program is pretty much targeted. We try to look at certain groups based off the guidelines of the grant. Our future items that we're looking at coming up in our next meeting is, there are two surveys out there that we're looking at. One is Teens Have Choices is going to do one this year with our current students, our 10th grade students in the high school health classes, as well as the 8th grade students. And basically, this is looking at trends and what students are doing now and decisions they're making about, different things in regards to health, eating habits, alcohol, as well as decisions making about STIs and consequences of sex and teen pregnancy. So we should have that information coming back to us in the spring, and hopefully we'll be able to use that to adjust instruction where we can within our schools. And I was told it would be broke out specifically so we'll be able to see specific schools and what's going on at their schools. The other one is Meredith has a school health needs assessment that they've completed in the spring, and we're getting information back from that, and hopefully we have more information broke down. That is, again, middle school and high school, but it's not specific to 8th graders and it's not specific to 10th graders. It's, if my understanding was right, the principals were given that to two different classes. I think at each one of the schools is the way that was done. And there was also a survey sent home to parents. The parents, however, was not specific to middle and high school. It was across the board, K to 12. So our goal is we hope to get information back from that, which will give us real data that we can use for our students and our community to be able to make adjustments accordingly with instruction in the family life. As I said, we will meet in the spring annually, just so we can review everything and review all the programs. However, we do meet on an as-need basis. So if something would come up, something new that comes up, a new concern, a change that we have to make, a change that comes up from the state that we have to make with regards to content, then we would meet to make sure we have enough time to go through everything with research, make sure we're putting recommendations forward, and then also give the board times to make their approval if that's the case that we have to do for the next year. And with that, are there any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Any discussion?
Quick question or two.
Sure, Mr. Bailey.
In the middle school program, parent permission still required, whereby they sign off that the youngster will be in the classes?
No. Actually, 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, COMAR regulations changed where it's everybody's included, but you have to opt out. So when we have the classes coming up, we make sure we alert the parents, we have parent meetings, we send information home, as well as we do the Alert Now call. In those, we make sure that we let parents know that if they do not want their child to be part of this, they need to send a note into the school. And we also do that as well in the 10th grade. When that unit is coming up, we send notes home to let the parents know that they can opt out of that section of the class.
The 10th grade offering is a graduation requirement.
Yes.
Are you getting students who are opting out at that level? Well, they can at that level if it's graduation.
Well, they can opt out of that specific unit. They don't opt out of the class, but they opt out of that specific unit.
Opt out of that unit.
Yeah.
How about opting out at the middle school?
They can opt out of the middle school. Typically, we don't get a whole lot, one or two here and there. And basically, in my conversation with parents, if they call and ask the questions of myself, it's just you get the parent that feels that that's a topic that should be discussed at home, and they're going to have that conversation with them at home, and which is fine. That's the reason the opt out is in.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Appreciate it.
Mrs. Brayton?
Mr. Michaels, going back to the Personal Responsibility Education Program grant, and if I understood correctly, it's only at the middle school level,
Yes.
but only in the city schools?
That's the target area for the grant that they're targeting. The city schools is what they're looking for.
Because we had some fairly high pregnancy rates at our other schools, non-city schools.
Yeah,
So I'm kind of curious how we're doing that enhancing. You said the grant was reduced this time, and
Yeah, the monies for the grant was reduced, so they don't have as many hours to. They have a team. The Girls Incorporated has a team that's ready to go out to the schools, but they don't have as much money to spend on materials and things of that nature. We've tried to supplement a lot of that with in-house.
that was my next question. Is
know,
there a
they-
recommendation from this committee to try to supplement?
Well,
and
what we've done
enhance?
is we work with the principals. Originally, they bought iPads for this program to work off iPads, but what we found is when we went into the schools, it was easier to block off time to go into a computer lab and use computer labs. So that seems to be working better. They've taken the iPads, I think, and they're doing some after-school time, like at the Boys and Girls Club and some of those places as well, and they're utilizing the iPads with those. But when we go into the schools, for the most part, we're blocking off computer lab time.
And you may not be prepared to answer this, but what is the budget for this program, and what would it take to expand to include all of our middle schools?
I'm not sure what the budget is and how much they've caught. I know my assumption was that the thought was over the summer we didn't hear anything, and then for the last 2 weeks we heard that they got money to keep the program going, but it was cut. I think if what we could do is potentially if we could find money to train, because you have to go through a training to do this, and if we had money to train other people, then that would be the way to be able to send them out to the other schools, because I think the team is 1 to 2 people from Girls Incorporated, which you start adding that up or start looking at going into a school and teaching 12 lessons. If you block off the time, you can do that pretty quickly, but if you have to do it on several days, for example, we went into Western Heights 2 years ago, and we were only there once or twice a week. So that carried out for several weeks because of the limited time we were in. And it was just a matter of fitting that into the schedule that's currently there and getting the kids so that they weren't missing other academic time.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Mrs. Harshman?
This refers to Mr. Bailey's question about opting out and opting in. I know that there was at one point in time, some great concern from parents who had not signed a permission slip and wanted to have the students have to opt in rather than opt out in case they missed something that came home. And I know that the educators' concern was that the parents don't always see the permission slips to be in, and then the students miss the program. Has anything taken shape with that? I mean, have we gotten discussions on people who are concerned that their students were in the programs and they did not realize that the students were going to be in there and they wanted them out?
I had one last year, just one, and that was the 9th grade, and it was a student that did not change. It was the address and phone number was not changed in Synergy at that time. There was an alpha number or something, said they missed the phone call and their address had changed, and the address was correct, but when we send out for the initial parent meeting, that's at the beginning of September. The parent meeting is the second week of September, and then we start in with the phone calls beforehand. And what ended up happening, the mother was, she was upset that it was missed, but in the long run, what we were able to do was actually change and get her address corrected, in which she was very thankful for that, or actually her phone number, I'm sorry, but once we did that, she was very appreciative of that information, but she was upset at the day that it happened. She was very angry when I got a phone call.
Well, what kind of responsibility do we have for putting a child in a program and the parent not wanting the child there? Is there any problem with pulling them out later, or?
No, if they call at any time, we can pull them out, and that's why we try to cover the bases with a letter sent home, notification by phone. We're also looking at the schools sending, as you said, the second handout. Send that back home, because as I said last year, we can't saturate it enough with letting parents know, because the fact is, with the opt out, we are seeing more kids. So, for example, our numbers in the 9th grade program have went from, let's take North and South High, where we have 300 and some kids in a grade level or close to it, where we were only getting 50% of those kids. Now we're getting closer to 75 to 80% of those kids involved in that.
Right.
So we're getting the message out, but at the same time, if somebody misses it, we do run that risk of somebody being in there. But out of the 2 years that we've been doing it at this point, I've had one phone call that somebody was missed, and that was just because the phone number was wrong in the system.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other discussion? I have 2 middle schoolers, and last year, when the letters came home, the notification, I went to the school for the night for parents just to see. I didn't suspect I'd want to pull opt my children out, but I sort of wanted to see how they presented it, how they approached the parents who may have religious objections, and I was very impressed with their respect for different points of view, sensitivity to the concerns the parents might have. They were very frank and forthright with, this is exactly what's going to be presented to your children, here's all the material, we can take questions at any time. I thought they were very professional, and I know for sure there were some parents who came into that room thinking, I'm going to opt out, and after seeing the discussion and the professionalism of the team that was going to present the material, walked out of the room and said, maybe this isn't so bad. So I just wanted to pass that along. I thought they were very professional, people in this community with all kinds of religious points of views, and I thought they were very respectful of all of them. So you can pass that along to them if you like.
Yeah, our team does a very good job, and I think our goal is to respect all the opinions, but we also know that, and we try to present that we run an abstinence-based program, but we also have we have a responsibility to present the facts, and that's what we try to do with this. It's very very touchy, delicate
Yes.
topic.
It is difficult, and I think I think that is what some of the parents who walked out felt, was that while everything in the program may not be exactly what they would want, they felt that it was respectful enough of what they were trying to do with their children at home, that they weren't worried about having their children go through it at school. So I think that speaks well to the way the whole process is designed.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is personnel action.
I'll have to have you start up here sooner.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board, as discussed earlier today in closed session, there are several personnel actions for your review and consideration tonight.
Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to move for approval of the staff recommendation for personnel.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Mr. Bailey, seconded by Mrs. Brightman to approve the personnel actions recommended by staff. Is there any discussion? Not all those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member abstains.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reports to the board. Board member committee reports is next. Mr. McHose, student government.
Our county student government had our first General Assembly last Tuesday, September 9th. I'd like to thank Mr. Haid for his presentation of Social Sentinel to our students. I think they left knowing a lot more about the program, feeling more confident in their privacy, and understanding its functionality. We'll have our next assembly October 14th at North Hagerstown High School, starting at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Mrs. Harshman, curriculum.
Curriculum and instruction met August 26th in the boardroom. The staff provided information on how the MAP assessment was chosen. They shared sample questions, explained how the test provided growth level and was aligned to children specifically. We also had summer transition program, which was for at-risk ninth graders coming into the high school. Either or both of the programs would certainly be excellent to have as a board-presented program in an open session if we have time in the near future.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman.
Oh, I'm sorry, we will have a meeting on September 23rd, 11:15, in the board conference room. Everyone's invited.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Mrs. Williams, Finance.
Yes, the Finance Committee will be meeting next Tuesday, September 23rd, at 3:30 in the Finance Conference Room.
Mrs. Fisher, Policy Review and Development.
Policy Committee met September the 4th. In addition to revisiting the policies that we worked on this evening during this meeting, the committee also began work on policy JGB, portable electronic communication devices in schools, and KLB, public complaints about the curriculum or instructional materials. We were briefed by Mr. Trotta on some sections from COMAR and also from Title 13A of the Annotated Code of Maryland about some changes that might be affecting such things as our policy on open meetings and Public Information Acts. We'll be taking a closer look at those things in the future. We also checked in reaction to a question about the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and decided it did not affect our policy GBEER, which is entitled Employee Use of Social Media, the regulation more specifically, because FERPA actually deals with records of students and didn't really fit into that policy. Our next meeting is September 23rd at 1:45.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Mr. Bailey, Facilities.
The Facilities Committee will meet on the 23rd at 8:45 here at the office. The agenda is being generated at this time. It will be available to the public and to the members of the board in advance.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Ridenhour, Human Resources.
Yes. The HR committee will meet next Tuesday, the 23rd, at 10 a.m. in the board conference room. Several topics will be discussed. Consolidated employment personnel policies will be reviewed. We will preview the HR update, which will be presented on October 7th to the full board. And we're going to look at some anticipated activities and initiatives for the 2014-15 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Any MABE committee updates? Mrs. Brightman?
One, I attended the May Budget and Planning Committee meeting on September 10th. We are to expect an annual increase on membership fees of 5%. There was a discussion on offering a profit and loss report on projects to control expenses as much as possible. Talked about a rebid cycle for our vendors, and also looked at the Keenan Pharmacy benefits, and I believe our staff attended a meeting at MABE a few days after this, maybe today even.
Today.
It was today. And basically it's a vendor who offers a less expensive drug program, prescription program for our self-insurance program. And as many of you may know, that your prescription, your drugs are a good 20 to 30% of the cost of a policy or premiums. So we're really looking at that, and there's supposed to be some significant cost savings. So that was it. Thank you.
Mrs. Harshman, Mrs. Williams, anything from Resolutions Committee or Conference Planning Committee?
We have a conference planning meeting on Friday, the 26th of September, and then the conference is coming up in Ocean City on October 1st through the 3rd, and we hope everyone can attend.
Thank you. I attended a meeting of the Maryland Advisory Council for Virtual Learning with Dr. Wilcox. I guess it was last week. It seems like longer than that, but a lot of discussion about the barriers to offering online courses and making them more available. One of the things that really was sort of a head shaker to me was there are 4,000 students in Maryland currently enrolled in some sort of online type of learning. That is less than 1% of our secondary students. So it sounds like a lot, but to me, less than 1% is a pretty small number, especially as I think about the way I work, and I'm sure the way many of us work, where so much of what we do is done in a virtual world or through a device such as this. I think Maryland has a long way to go to get us on par with frankly what a lot of other states are doing and with the way the work world works. So I thought I'd share that with all of my colleagues. Are there any other committees that need to report? That brings us to future agenda items. Agenda planning did meet earlier today. We're going to have our legislative meeting with the delegation on December 9th at 5:30. That will be in this building. We are also adding to a agenda soon a discussion of the calendar. The calendar committee is going to be reforming. There are going to be some new members because it's been a couple of years since they've worked. And we're going to have a brief discussion as a board to see if there's any particular direction we want to give the committee before they go and do their work. Things like snow days, how spring break, whether we want that handled in a different way, the day before Thanksgiving. I had a young man ask me why we don't have Veterans Day off. All those are things that we can give direction to the committee for them to consider as they go about their work. So that will be coming up on a future agenda. The next meeting will also be discussing the process that will be used for the naming of the just approved West City Elementary School. So be prepared for that discussion. We'll also have a discussion on October 7th regarding the academic hub and an update of where that is and possibly a motion for the board to consider. We also discussed Mrs. Williams' suggestion to have a work session on the social media policy. We opted against doing a work session on it, but have asked the superintendent if he would consider during the superintendent's report at an upcoming meeting to discuss some of the efforts that have been undertaken to communicate with the public and with our employees, whether that's the frequently asked questions that went out or some of the other things we've done to outreach to our stakeholders to make sure that they understand the intent as well as the letter of what the policy and regulation says. So I just wanted to update you on that since you made that request. Next time we meet, we'll also consider Mrs. Harshman's request to have a discussion on the items that she said they discussed at the Curriculum and Instruction Committee. I think that's it for future agenda. Board member comments. Mr. McHose?
Nothing to comment.
Mrs. Harshman?
Nothing at this time.
Mrs. Williams?
I would just like to say that I had the opportunity to attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony at Bester Elementary School on September 9th, and how very happy and pleased I am for that community and the students at Bester. I think they have a beautiful school, and I know that they'll have great pride in what happens there.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Fisher?
I'd like to say thank you to the schools and/or individual teachers who chose either to observe a moment of silence in remembrance of the events of September 11th, or who chose to educate their students, I guess it's primarily through social studies classes about that event. Just thank you for doing that.
Mr. Bailey?
I would encourage as many student participation activities as exemplified by the group this evening, the FFA group, if there are others out there that deserve recognition, that they come to the board also.
And they don't all need to bring gifts,
They
but they're
don't.
certainly welcome.
They don't.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Ridenour? Mrs. Brightman?
No comments this evening.
I have no comments either. Thank you all. We'll declare the meeting adjourned.